Excuse me. Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Tuesday, November 4th, 2025. I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and Change. This podcast covers the national champions. Still ranked number one. Good to be king. Also good to have some pull in the network. As you notice, only two faces up there, and I'm going to be overshadowed by the Florida tanned, rested, and refreshed face of 247Sports Director of Scouting, Andrew Ivins. Andrew is nice enough to grace us with his presence every now and then as we take kind of a national look at Ohio State recruiting. And I also think Andrew is about the best guy to get in this unbelievably wild landscape of recruiting, etc. So, Andrew, welcome to the show.
Dan, thanks for having me. Hey, there was a cold front over the weekend. I was not in the sun. I actually had to wear a sweater for once.
Lord.
But hey, T-minus a month until signing day, right?
Yep.
I don't know if it's 30 or 31 days. I don't know how many days we got here in November, but recruiting season is here, right? And then we're going to get into the transfer portal, and then next thing you know, we have the college football playoff games and then spring practices. So excited to be on this morning.
Yeah, we're rocking and rolling. First, I want to get your perspective on the just absolute wild situation that is college football now. Let's just talk about the coaching upheaval as it relates to recruiting. I feel like we've spent so much time talking about recruiting windows and signing dates and different rhythms. And I really feel I've used the term uncharted waters so many times now that people think I'm like Meryl Steubing on the Love Boat. I've never seen anything even close to this, though, in terms of the programs that have fired their coaches during the season. Everyone knows the names, but LSU, Florida, Penn State, Virginia Tech, UCLA, these are either marquee programs or programs that have held the marquee at times. To do it during the season is wild. Why do you think it's all happened during the season at such an aggressive rate? And then how does this affect recruiting? Because a lot of the recruiting classes for these teams were pretty much put to bed, and I put that in super air quotes now, but it's created like this secondary rush of recruiting where there was always an attempt to flip guys you were in on. Maybe if you had a better season, the other team didn't, but now it's just gotten wild. Can you assess kind of the national vibe on it before we drill down on Columbus?
Well, Dan, I think there's a lot to unpack here. And, I'm certainly not in like the agent game, but I do talk with guys in that side of the business, and kind of the rumblings dating back to last spring was, hey, this 2025 coaching carousel is going to be crazy, right? A lot of teams elected to wait. And why? I think rev share and the changing of the distribution of money had a big part in that. A lot of schools are going to be armed with funds that maybe they didn't have previously. And I think the other thing is everyone's just trying to figure out this new landscape, and it's an ever-changing landscape. You said uncharted waters. I feel like, we start getting some maps out, right? And then it just gets completely blown up. The tide shifts, right? We've gone from multiple transfer portal windows to one transfer portal windows. It used to be February's traditional national signing day. Now it's the early signing period. And I think everyone's just trying to adjust. And, I can't speak for all these athletic directors at all those programs you rattled off. But what I think is a bit funny is, these guys are as fired or have parted ways with head coaches as early as ever. And I think the thought is, well, hey, we'll get someone in before the early signing period. But me and you both know, okay, 12 playoff teams, you're not going to get a sitting head coach to leave early and give up on a potential championship run. And you're also not going to pull a coordinator away from these guys. So, how many of these jobs are actually filled by December 3rd? I think that's an interesting talking point, because I would assume not many, maybe a handful, but you're limiting your pool, I think, of available candidates. And, recruiting, right? Obviously that's what I'm in, the high school recruiting. it has created a position where if you have some stability, right, you have an opportunity to be very proactive in the weeks leading up to signing day. I said it on Cover 3, I think last week. Ohio State's in as good of a position as anyone to close strong. And I know they've signed, I think it's 6 straight top 5 recruiting classes, sitting number 9 right now in the rankings. Are they going to get into the top 5? And I need to bust out the 247Sports recruiting class calculator. But I think they can come close because they've made excellent senior season evaluation. They have smelled blood in the water with programs that are currently open, like Penn State and some of these other ones. So it's funny. We transition from February being, kind of the big show with recruiting. And then everyone has been racing to get these recruiting classes in place by July 4th weekend, right? All the coaches want to be on college, at their beach houses and looking at all the commitments roll in. And I'm interested to see if there's a shift back into more of an emphasis placed on the senior seasons, because in my chair, when I look at, college football right now and I turn on the TV on Saturday, the true freshmen that are making plays are like the ones that also did it as seniors. And I think just with how accelerated things have gotten, that senior season is so important, right? We're talking about 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds. Some of these guys don't even start as youngsters. So there's a lot of development in that year. And again, I think the biggest thing is with all this change, if you have, continuity, you're in prime position to make some noise when it comes to high school talent acquisition.
I did take in that Cover 3 recruiting podcast, and I'll prove it to you. That comment on Ohio State was made in minute 50 of a 51-minute podcast. So I was there till the end. I want to go back to what you said. You said you thought on the podcast that Ohio State's doing the best job identifying senior risers. Can you put a little meat on that? And who are some guys that kind of come to mind when you say that?
Yeah, Dan, I mean, obviously, we're preparing for a rankings update. I'm watching a lot of tape. I got my pulse on what's going on as best I can around the country with high schoolers. And, when I get on Bucknuts and I look at the visitors list for the Penn State game or some of these previous contests, and I look at the seniors that are visiting, I start checking them off. I'm like, okay, like what this kid's doing as a senior, you're probably going to be a riser for us. Like this kid, I can see the vision here. I can see the vision here. And I think Ohio State's one of the few programs right now where they have it humming on all sides of things. And, these recruiting departments have evolved around the country. And obviously Mark Pantoni's kind of godfather of the GM role. He's sat in that chair for a very long time, and he's had to change. He has had to adapt. And I think it's taken Ohio State a while to figure it out. But with the name, image, likeness, with the compensation, with these agents getting involved with these high profile prospects, it's easy for some schools to come to agreements when there hasn't really been much proven. And I think Ohio State has taken a different approach. Yeah, they're going to get involved with some of these blue chip, best of the best 5 stars, but they're going to be calculated. Hey, does this make sense for us? Does this guy fit our system? Do we think this guy's going to be playing year 1, year 2 at some point down the line? And what I really like, again, is, they are assessing and evaluating all these guys around the country. They are looking for the guys with the arrows clearly pointing up. And, Kamari Bing's, I think, a great example that they flip him from Maryland, a kid at St. Francis Academy. He's awesome. Like, I think you can make the case out of all of Ohio State's defensive back commits, like he's the best in coverage. And I know he's a 3-star prospect for us now. That, that could change as we get closer to signing day. Again, we got this update coming, but I just think it's been very impressive how they've kind of set this up. They got the bulk of the class in place, and then they said, hey, we're going to get aggressive with the senior season flips.
There was some, I don't know if panic is the right word. I think there's been some consternation among, and I'm kind of doubling down on this topic, consternation among Buckeye fans about bidding for guys. And what we've tried to, or at least I've tried to say, is I don't think they fear paying guys. I just think there's a certain profile the guy has to fit, which means you've got to be able to walk in the locker room and be such a stud that no one else questions your getting on the field that early or how much you get. So like I said, we talked a little before the show, Caleb Downs, obviously, but I use Devin Sanchez as kind of the example. It's a guy who committed earlier on in the process, not the type to come back as a family and negotiate multiple times, but knew he was going to get on the field pretty early. I think if Ohio State knows you can come in and get on the field early and on this roster, they'll get into it with you. I think Braylon Womack was the example everyone kind of got upset about because Ohio State gets into these. I mean, we talked about Tyler Atkinson forever. We talked about, the big offensive lineman going to Miami. His name escapes me. We talked about all these guys, and then you kind of get down to the end of and it's like we lost out to Miami. We lost out to Auburn, and people say things like, oh, we don't recruit against those guys. They were a higher priority for those schools. But now, for example, Womack, back, I don't know what's going to happen with him. Do you think that approach is sound? And is that a realistic assessment of what's going on? Because like I've said before the show, I think we have the highest paid offensive player in the country or close to it. I think we have the highest paid defensive player in the country, Jackson Cantwell. Thank you, LV. But they have clearly identified there's a level they're going to go to for certain dudes. Do you think that works? What's your in terms of you get to see every program get after it? Miami right next door. What's your vibe on how to do it? Does that work?
Yeah. Well, I think that's like the multi-million-dollar question, right? I think everyone is looking for someone to figure it out, and then everyone's going to quickly follow suit. I mean, think about when Nick Saban was at Alabama, how many times you heard, well, hey, this guy's from the Saban tree. He could set up a similar shop here, similar operation, kind of same language, same ideology. And I think that applies to roster management a little bit. Everyone's still trying to figure this whole thing out. I mean, heck, like I think JUCO football is like making a comeback, right? We're seeing a lot of these schools, USC, I mean, they got one of the top recruiting classes in the country. They're grabbing junior college guys. Why are they doing that? Well, schools have realized, hey, we got one transfer portal window right now, and we don't want to be searching for depth at the buzzer, right? Like we don't want to have to get to plan D. You know, we got our plan A portal guy, plan B, plan C. We don't want to get to D, so maybe we should take a junior college guy. But that's a completely different conversation. I think what the three guys you mentioned, Jeremiah Smith, Caleb Downs, and Devin Sanchez, I had interactions with all those guys as recruits, maybe some more than others, but if you are looking for a tying thread between the three, like they're all pros, right? They are all just those type of individuals. And think about it.
No risk.
Yeah, Jeremiah Smith, it's still like when I point this out to people, Jeremiah Smith announced his commitment to Ohio State like over social media. There was no cameras. There was no big announcement ceremony. I mean, he's just a kind of a different individual. I mean, Caleb Downs, I go back to his recruitment, and I know he initially started off at Alabama, but he was a very reserved and non-splashy type of individual. I mean, he would communicate like there was a sense of respect with the recruiting media, but he kind of beat to his own drum. And then Devin Sanchez, I think you kind of put him in that same bucket. So what I'm getting at is I think everyone needs to kind of recalibrate how recruiting is these days, right? Like the curve is flattening, right? Like name, image, and likeness and this rev share is giving programs that are hungry for a national championship, that are hungry for a college football playoff berth. They are giving them the ammunition to go get these players that usually ended up in the Big Ten, ended up in the SEC. I mean, Dan, like the number one player in the country could very well end up signing with Houston. And that's Keyshawn Henderson, the five-star quarterback. I mean, he's in the conversation. So he's going to Houston. Well, hey, over the weekend, Texas Tech just landed a potential five-star quarterback in Kavion Bryant. You also got Ryder Lyons that's committed to BYU. So we're talking about three potential five-star quarterbacks in the Big 12. And, I was posed this question yesterday. Well, hey, is this just a one-off, right? These guys have ties to the school. And I would push back. Like, right. I think these schools are all in. I think that's how they've elected to use their funding, use that salary cap, and distribute what they're going to do. And so for Ohio State, they got to make some decisions, right? Obviously, I think it all ultimately boils down to the players on your roster, but not everyone's going to fit that culture, that locker room there at Ohio State. You bring up a great point. Like, if you're going to pay as much money, a ton of money for one of these kids, well, guess what? Everyone's going to know that. All the kids are going to know that. So when that kid shows up in the locker room, he better look like Jeremiah Smith in practices, right? He better be turning heads. So I think for Ohio State, they're picky. And I think it's the right approach, because I hear it all the time talking with guys that build these rosters. We want the right players. We want the right individuals. We want people there that are for the right reasons. And I know that sounds like coach speak, but it's becoming increasingly important, especially if you want sustained success. You don't want the peaks and valleys.
Yeah, I use the term, and I got it from Gonzaga basketball. They call it OKGs, our kind of guys. I would put Devin Sanchez like that. Like I said, it wasn't about, look, everyone wants money. Everyone deserves money. Devin Sanchez and Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Smith are playing the long game here. They are going to be professional football players. Every single player who comes to Ohio State within reason is the best player in the history of his town, and they announced they're coming for 3 years. So you better put them in the league. And they do that with routine excellence. I think it's a big deal. Receiver has gotten to the point where I'm to the point with receiver now. If Ohio State offers it and you don't take it, I'm out. I don't even I didn't want you in the first place. I'm serious, because if you really think you're one of the best receivers on the earth, there's no arguing against going to Ohio State, maybe LSU. All right, question: how did we get here? Ohio State's number one. I think they lost 14 guys to the draft. They're going to come back with maybe 4 first-round draft picks. Their recruiting what has made Ohio State so attractive? I feel like Ohio State's kind of maintained. Maybe the other SEC schools have dripped down a little bit, so we were just kind of looking over the scene. Do you see it that way? What's your assessment nationally before we get down specifics on 26 and 27 for Ohio State?
This is going to sound so weird, I think, to some people. I mean, obviously, I consume a lot of college football. I know a lot of these players. To me, I think it starts up front on the offensive line. Like, I think that is a big reason why Ohio State has had the success that it's had, right? It's why they won a national title. It's why they're ranked number one in the polls and going to have a chance at repeating. And yeah, they got it right at quarterback with Julian Sayin. They got maybe the 2 best wide receivers in college football, and Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. I'm a huge Carnell Tate guy. Obviously, I'm a huge Jeremiah Smith guy. I'm just going to say, I was on a CBS midseason All-American poll. A lot of people didn't have Jeremiah Smith on there, which I thought was non-ball knowers. It was surprising to me because just watch him, man. He commands coverage. So they got that right, but you look at the offensive line. 4 homegrown blue chip recruits. And I say homegrown, meaning they sign these guys out of high school. They've been in the program, right? They've coached them, they developed them, they've been there the entire way. Yeah, Phillip Daniels comes in from Minnesota. They grab one transfer, high-profile transfer, but he's a kid that's originally from Ohio. Last year in the national title game, I believe, and I know there were some injuries, all 5 of the starters up front for the Buckeyes were homegrown high school recruits. And when you look at some of these other power brokers, and I don't like using the blue bloods terms anymore because it's so much has changed, but you look at the other programs that are completely invested in football. A lot of them are leaning on transfer offensive linemen. And I think for Ohio State, these guys, you're getting them in for the right reasons, right? And yeah, once they're playing and once they're making an impact, I'm sure they're getting taken care of. But, it's not just those guys. I mean, the 6th and 7th offensive linemen for Ohio State from Ohio, right? Guys that are local products. And it's not like this is just, a 1-year sample size. I mean, go down the 2 deep for Ohio State. It's like, well, they recruited that guy out of high school. They recruited that guy out of high school. They recruited that guy out of high school. You look at the commit list, bunch of guys from Ohio, offensive linemen, or local prospects that are of the blue chip caliber. So I think Ohio State being able to, not volume shoot, but take numbers every year at that position has put them in has put them in a spot where they really don't have to worry about the offensive line. They don't have to go chase depth. They don't have to go chase, potential starters. And again, I know they did it with Phillip Daniels, but I think they had the luxury to do that because they liked everything else that they had there. And, some of these other programs, they find themselves in positions where, you're grabbing 3 offensive linemen. That gets expensive really fast, really, really fast. Those are the add-on packages, right? Like next thing you know, that money you could have used elsewhere is going up front so you can protect your quarterback. So I think it starts with the offensive line. I think the other thing on defense, yeah, Caleb Downs, awesome. But they got some Ohio kids in there as well. Arvell Reese, Sody Styles, Jermaine Matthews. And they've supplemented with the transfer portal as well on the defensive side of the ball. But, the spine of this roster is constructed through the high school ranks, and it flows through Ohio. And, I don't know how many programs around the country can say the same thing. So that's what jumps out to me, just kind of assessing where they are, 8 months after winning the national title.
I would agree. I think someone said this, I think it was on 247Sports. I don't remember exactly. In the LSU kind of kerfuffle, LSU and Ohio State have a little bit of an advantage to me over everybody else from jump, because no, Louisiana and Ohio are not the top producers of talent, but their hit rate on guys in state is really high, really high. Now, ironically, Ohio State is peaking here, and we lost guys that we wanted in Ohio. There used to be like 2 or 3 guys over a decade, you could say, who got an offer from Ohio State and didn't come within reason. The state of Cincinnati and some Catholic school kids, a Tommy Kramer, Liam Eichenberg went up to Notre Dame. But now, like Elbert Hill, guys like that, we may lose out on them, but you can't get everybody. I think what Ohio State has done, and you can disagree with me, and I do think, yes, they're less likely maybe to get the second 5-star safety in the class. But to me, the way there's salary slots, right? I think they're more likely now to get the 5-star safety, the first one, because those are slotted. The 5-star safeties go to the highest bidders, right? Ohio State's going to have a slot for you. Now, the second one, the gluttony we used to get just because we were the factory. Now, that one you might have to, it's Blaine Bradford over Braylon Womack. You may not get both. But I do think if you look, once they've targeted a guy and really gone after him, they've got a really good chance. There's only a few other schools I could say that about. When I look at recruiting now, it's funny. You look at who your peers were, because you're always recruiting against the same guys and it goes in rhythms. And now I used to have okay, if the guy has, regardless of his ranking, if he has the offer from USC, Florida, Notre Dame, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, LSU, he's a complete stud. Now, you just knew, doesn't matter what the ranking is, right? Now, I did not think Texas Tech could pull off what they're doing. And I didn't think you could go from, let's just say, I'm not trying to be mean, mediocre program to true championship contender with multiple 5-stars in tow. That, to me, is the program. That's like the Texas Tech oil barons should be their name. Ohio State, I'm just happy we've been able to do it our way. All right, let's get to specifics.
Well, hey,
go ahead.
Can I give you one example real quick?
Sure.
To go what you're talking about like that second tier of player maybe in Ohio. I think Milan Paris is like a great example. Like, I love Milan Paris, right? Big 6'5", 200-pound
wide receiver, just committed to Miami.
Yeah, he was committed to Iowa State. And, you think about Zone 6, Brian Hartline kind of drafts his guys at that position. I think Ohio State's they got like 5 receivers committed right now. I mean, I don't know where Milan Paris was initially on the board. He's been a late riser, a kid that has really turned it on as a senior. And I think for, maybe some Ohio State fans, it's like, well, hey, this kid's in state, again, we get who we want at wide receiver. He's a major rankings riser. All these schools got involved. Oregon, like you said, Miami, where he's ended up. from my understanding, like the deal Milan Paris got would make him like one of the top paid wide receivers right now in the Big Ten, right? And that's just secondhand. I mean, who knows? No one ever sees any of these contracts, but for Ohio State, would that make sense? Like,
Absolutely not.
is Milan Paris getting on the field in 2026? Is Milan Paris better than Quincy Porter or
2027?
Yeah. So I think fans need to kind of digest that, where, to your point, they're slotting. There's a lot of numbers getting thrown around, and decisions have to be made, right? It's turned into the NFL, right? You want to hit on the first and second round picks, right? Those 5 stars at the top of the board. But where you win championships is going to be the back end of that recruiting class. It's going to be day 3. It's going to be, the 4 stars at the backs of the top 247. It's going to be the 3 stars. And then you got to hit in free agency, which is the transfer portal. Sure.
You got to handpick those guys. And they've done a great job of that. Last question in a general sense, and then we'll get to specifics. So we talked about all these coaches being fired from all those schools. Is it now just completely open season on all of those recruits? Are like in the past, I don't like some guys would flip, but I didn't get the sense that it was like complete, chaos, some Egyptian bazaar or something. Now it feels like, and I don't really know this, and you may know this better than me. I don't know the NIL to these kids that were committed. Did they sign contracts? Are they now leveraging those contracts on new offers? Are they locked in? So what is going on day to day at like the other programs in terms of holding on to the recruits? And is it just even more wild than ever?
I do think it's wild, right? Like I think buckle up for the next 4 weeks, especially we get like right around Thanksgiving. I think there's going to be some hires there.
Okay.
From my understanding, like every contract's different. I do think some of these programs have, maybe locked some of these commits in that are, now committed to a program without a head coach. I was at Player Personnel Symposium back in August, right? Talking with a ton of different SEC GMs, Big Ten GMs, and like, there was no consensus. Is it like a 1-year deal? Is it a 2-year deal? Like everyone just kind of has a different thought process here. And yeah, are players leveraging offers against other schools? Absolutely. I'll give you an example here. I was talking to an SEC GM and he's like, hey, we took this kid, last January. He had an agent at the time. We agreed to a deal. Well, next thing you know, come May, he's got a new agent, and they want a new offer. And we say, okay, yeah, he comes in camps and works out. We'll renegotiate the package we have. Well, the kid does that, agree to everything. Then they get to August, and the kid's got a third agent, right? And now the third agent saying, I can get this number from a different school. So I don't envy those guys at all in terms of dealing with those individuals. I think a lot of leverage happens right now. I think some of these guys are in wait and see mode, but yeah, again, like Ohio State to me is like one of these programs where you have the continuity, you have the coaching staff in place, and that allows them to get aggressive and to go out after these guys. The other thing too is like what's unique about this signing period is we have no head coach in home visits, right? We don't have these big recruiting weekends in December. That's all dead. So correct me if I'm wrong here, like Ohio State's dialing up a big recruiting weekend in 2 weeks. And that wouldn't have been the case. Yep. Yeah, that wouldn't have been the case.
Correct.
Previously. Like now these game day visits are important. So things have just completely changed. And I think, again, like that last week in November in the lead up, it's going to be fun.
One reason I talked about this, how we've just been able to, Ohio State's, like I said, cruising and the layers you peel back are really good. One of the reasons I think that recruiting people are a little bit, I don't know. Ohio State has done such a good job recruiting quarterbacks and wide receivers. And if you look at the other programs, that tends to be 2 of the major things they're always going after. We really don't discuss that as much here as we probably should have. We take it for granted, partially because we have quarterbacks locked up for years. Every top quarterback in the country came and camped here this past summer. Literally, every single guy you would want pretty much was here. There's no question. We've already got Chris Henry and his buddy Wyatt, Dixon Wyatt. We've already got Jameer Brown. So a lot of the consternation, a lot of the angst, like look at Oklahoma. They brought in a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback, and revamped their whole system. We don't even have to consider that until the 2030. So I think we almost take that for granted here, which is incredible. I mean, I knew Julian Sayin was going to be great. I told everybody, and it's hard to get on the field here at quarterback, man. It's hard. If you get on the field at Ohio State at receiver now, you're going to get picked by the Buccaneers in the middle of the first round. And I'm generalizing, but I'm really not. I'm really not. Like they've been able to maintain those two, but the fact that they have a quarterback pipeline set up, like I honestly believe this. I would rather have Lincoln Keenholz than Carson Beck. I'm not lying when I say that. Okay, he's our backup. I mean, it's gluttony. All right, I'm going to get accused of sunshine pumping again. Again, the name of the site is
well. To echo that, like exercise I did over the weekend, quarterback out there that I think is going to hit the transfer portal. I was like, okay, like how many schools are fine with their quarterback situation heading into 2026? Like Ohio State is an obvious yes. I think that number is like 9 or 10. Not a lot of teams, I think. You get into some interesting conversations.
Exactly.
Like, we like this guy, but, he hasn't started or, the flashes have been there. How many programs are gung-ho about what they got set up in 2026? I think that's a pretty exclusive club.
If Tavian Sinclair was on Miami, there would be people calling for him to be playing over Carson Beck. That's a fact. Now, I'm going to take some crap for that. I'm willing to take like I told you, I live in Dayton. He's a fine Bellefontaine native, and there are chicken commercials on here with the third string quarterback munching on some wings and getting paid, which we love. All right, 2026 Buckeye commitments that you like, that you obviously the talk about Chris Henry, because his ranking has moved up and down, and people, he's been higher, he's been lower. Your thoughts on Chris Henry, and then other 2026 guys you really like that maybe not everybody has dialed in on, that are committed to Ohio State.
Well, let's start with the two Mater Dei wide receivers, because I think you have to talk about them in pairs, right? And over the weekend, we saw Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, absolutely torch Penn State. Well, Chris Henry, Caden Dixon-Wyatt, they torched a number 1 ranked St. John Bosco team. Those guys combined for 9 receptions for 259 yards.
It feels eerily similar to what went on in the shoe, but go ahead.
Yeah, 5 touchdowns. So, look, I think we are higher on Caden Dixon-Wyatt than I think many. I'm convicted in the evaluation. Like, I think Caden Dixon-Wyatt is Carnell Tate 2.0, right? Like, you look at him, and it might not be, a true wide receiver 1 type of projection, but I think he is the ideal number 2. He's an elite technical route runner. He knows how to create separation. He's an explosive athlete, right? Kind of with Carnell Tate, I think there will always be questions about the top end gear.
Yep.
But his balance, his control, his ability to snap back to the quarterback and get open. I'm a huge fan of Caden Dixon-Wyatt. So, internally for us, like we're trying to go back and forth. We're trying to get these guys at Mater Dei stacked correctly in the rankings. And, they're not the only high profile guys there. You also got Mark Bowman, the tight end, going to USC, Cody Green, offensive tackle, going to Washington. Chris Henry has been, by far one of the more polarizing evaluations, right? He starts his career off in Ohio. I love this sophomore tape. I was like, okay, this guy's potential number 1 player in the country. He goes to Mater Dei. He plays less than 50 snaps as a junior.
Got hurt.
Injures his knee. Now, that knee injury, I don't think this has really been discussed. I mean, it occurred because he was driving a defensive back essentially into the sidelines and kind of got rolled up. So, it wasn't some like free. I guess it wasn't some like soft injury. It was like, no, this came because the effort and the determination was there. Obviously, he explodes on the scene back in August on ESPN, right? Huge monster performance. I had my boss texting me like, hey, how is this guy not a 5-star prospect? And I remind him, I'm like, well, hey, you know, he didn't play. We haven't really seen much of him. Dealt with some more injuries this season, but back healthy, and he was a monster against St. John Bosco. I mean, he is over 6'5". He's 200 pounds. Initially, you know, I was like, is he going to grow into a tight end? I don't think he's got that in the waist. I think he's a pure X on the outside. Kind of reminds me of Nico Collins. Like if I had to come up with a player comp for Chris Henry.
That'll do.
You know, yeah. I mean, can chew up cushion. He too can play above shoulder pads with opponents. I think he's gotten better in catch and run situations. Like a lot of the yardage he had against Bosco were kind of chunk plays where he built momentum down the sidelines. It was the same thing early on in the season when everyone saw him on ESPN. So he's in the conversation to finish inside our top 32. Just accepted an invitation to the Navy All-American Bowl. You know, even if he finishes 33 or 34, like he is going to the best possible situation with Brian Hartline there. I think he's the best at fine-tuning these wide receivers. So, yeah, Chris Henry, Caden Dixon-Wyatt, I love those guys. And they're going to keep the Zone 6 tradition well alive.
No doubt. Who else in 26 jumps out at you? And generally speaking, you think this is a good recruiting class? Because I will admit, and I don't want to hurt your feelings, I don't get super cut. Like I told you, the way I do the rankings is what schools want the guy. And really at Ohio State, we're spoiled. The rankings are important, but people don't like the 9. I'm not going to lie to you. They don't like seeing 9 period Ohio State. They're not used to 9s in anything. Tell me why, or tell us why we should or should not be worried about the 9th ranked class. I know you said it might change anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, we're trying to get the rankings right. Like watching as much tape as ever. I'm confident in like this 2026 top 247 is going to be the most dialed it's ever been. I think for 247 Sports, and yeah, obviously I'm sitting at the top of it, but you know. This class we've been tracking like all of them since they were freshmen. And for us, just like Ohio State, we put a big emphasis on those senior seasons. We want the guys with the arrows pointing up. And, you know, that's what we're doing. Just like Ohio State, just like these other programs, like we are watching the senior tape and we are evaluating these guys without the helmet logo that they're going to be wearing, because in this transfer portal era, I mean, these guys can move wherever they want. So yeah, like a Chris Henry, it's nice to know that he's going to be playing for Brian Hartline, but he could very well end up at USC someday or whatnot. Another receiver,
burn bridges.
I'm just pointing out that example. I'm not trying to like pollute the waters and say that's a possibility. I mentioned they got all those wide receivers committed. Jerquan Guilford is a guy to me. Turn on the tape. Love him. 3-star prospect for us. I think good chance he's going to finish as a 4-star. He's having a monster senior season, 21 yards per catch, 17 tackles, an interception on defense, but 12 touchdowns on offense. Elite combine tester. I mean, we loved him early on as a youngster, wanted to see him kind of put it together there in Indiana. I think he's done that. He's got size. Like he would be my 3rd receiver in the class for Ohio State if I had to stack them. Big fan there. Sincere Johnson, you know, probably going to list him as an edge. I think he could be a linebacker. I mean, he might be the top player in the state of Ohio for this class. We love what he has been able to do as a senior. I mean, aggressive at the point of attack, impressive FBI, downhill charge. I think he's going to offer on and off ball flex, playing a little bit more Mike as a senior, but he can bend, rare stopping power in the hole, efficient mover in drop coverage. I think this guy's the real deal. He's going to be at the Under Armour All-America game, or he's scheduled to be. I mean, who knows how many of these guys Ohio State's going to pull in for college football playoff preparations, but really like what he's done as a senior. Sam Greer, the mountain of an offensive tackle. he's an interesting one, right? And we're seeing more of these big bodies play. And it wasn't too long ago where the scouting community, I think they thought, all right, gotta be light, and we'll build these guys up as they're going to be more athletic and able to hang on the corner. This year, true freshmen, we're seeing a lot of big boys playing as youngsters. Juan Gadsden at Georgia, Braden Jacobs at Clemson. Like, the mass is in, right? A lot of these schools are hoarding it, and Sam Greer's got a ton of that. Verified at over 6'7", 315 pounds. He had MAC basketball offers. He is a tall tower. I think he's probably more of a right tackle than he is a left tackle. But circling back to what we talked about 20 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago, hey, what is allowing Ohio State to be Ohio State right now? It's the big boys up front, and it's getting them from the high school ranks, and more specifically so getting them from the state of Ohio. And Sam Greer checks off all those boxes. I think he's definitely a redshirt candidate. But for Ohio State, which has
most guys are,
which has plenty of guys in the pipeline. I mean, I don't know if you could do any worse than Sam Greer, or any better, I should say. Last guy here, Kari Wilder, the defensive lineman out of LA, hyperactive frontline defender, get off, agility, all there. I think he could be a pesky 3 technique. It kind of reminds me of Shamar Turner, who was at Texas A&M. I think he went day 2 of the NFL draft here this past year. Another guy, huge senior season, 20 tackles for loss, 20 sacks in 10 games. I think he's got to improve the pad level. Most of these guys do. I think he's got to work on the flexibility in the lower half. But you want to talk about like a ball of energy in the middle. I mean, that is Kari Wilder. So yeah, a lot to like in this class. I brought up Kamari Bing, the safety they flipped from Maryland. And I know there's a bunch of defensive backs committed to the Buckeyes. A lot of guys that are established names: Simeon Caldwell, Blaine Bradford, Jordan Thomas. To me, Kari Wilder, I think, has the best range out of all those guys. Got a chance to see him when St. Francis took on Chaminade Madonna Prep early on in the season. He had an interception. St. Francis plays a national schedule.
They're legit.
Yeah, and this guy, it's true sideline to sideline range, elite tester on the younger side for the grade. So he's another one we're going to scale up here as we kind of formalize these rankings. But to me, I know Ohio State doesn't have a corner just yet. I know they're in it for some of these guys, or Jordan Thomas, is kind of the corner in the class. They're looking to add another. I think if you needed to, Kamari Bing in a pinch could play on the outside, but I think he's going to be at his best over the top, kind of in a split system.
All right. I've already held you too long. Let's finish with this. 2027 guys that they have in the fold. I'll say this, by the way. You mentioned offensive linemen. They also got Maxwell Riley.
Yep.
And then I do think they're going to get, this is just my opinion, I do think they're going to flip Kevin Brown from Penn State. So that'll give you 3 top 10 tackles in the class, according to 20. You can't do, that is gold. And you're right about about Sam Greer. I actually saw Sam Greer play in the state championship basketball game as a freshman. Has those sweet feet. And I remember Mark Porter and I were like, listen, man, that size feet combo, there's only, they made a movie called The Blind Side for a reason. There's not so many guys like that. All right. 27 class of 2027 guys you love that Ohio State has gotten, if there's any, and then maybe 1 or 2 guys that you think they're going to be in it for till the end that you really like.
2 in-state offensive linemen committed in 2027.
Shocker. So, theme.
Yeah, the theme of the show, I think. Jameer Brown, right? Wide receiver. Obviously, he's committed to the Buckeyes. Hudson Standish on our scouting team has pounded the table over and over. He thinks this guy's Ted Ginn. I think an interesting kind of storyline to track here over really the next year, because we're going to be talking about these two. And until then, is Jameer Brown versus Monshun Sales, the wide receiver out of Indiana. Monshun, we made him a 5-star prospect. Jameer Brown's wide receiver 2. We haven't stamped him as a 5-star just yet. Monshun Sales to me he's a freak, right? He is a freak athlete. I had a hunch when I saw him play 7-on-7. I was on paternity leave. He was playing in Orlando. I told my wife, I'm like, I have to go see this kid. I think he's
going to get some big thing of milk. I'll be right back.
Yeah. And it turns out it's all rung true, because his junior season has been awesome. I think why I'm so like fixated on the Monchon Sales thing is, again, Brian Hartline gets who he wants at wide receiver. And does he fancy Monchon Sales? Like, is this a marriage between the two parties? Because if not, I think he's a guy that can solve a lot of problems for a lot of other programs around the country that wish they had Ohio State's wide receivers. So, yeah, Jameer Brown, love him. Speedster, burner, he can get deep. Monchon Sales, to me, I think he's more of a guy that has that true wide receiver one potential.
Yep.
So I want to see if Ohio State moves in there. Angelo Smith, Jeremiah Smith's brother, like this flew a little bit under the radar when he announced his commitment to the Buckeyes. I think a lot of people are just assuming, oh man, hey, it's Jeremiah Smith. They're trying to keep, the family happy, the camp happy. Angelo Smith can play football, right? He is not big, but guess what? Jeremiah Smith was not always big, right? Like Jeremiah Smith is good and elite because he learned how to get open when he was like 6 feet. Right. And when he was like 160 pounds. Right. And now he's 6'3" and 235. I mean, to me, he looks like he's 235, but he moves extremely well. Angelo Smith on the smaller side, going to be a 3-year starter at Chaminade Madonna Prep. He's got 3 interceptions on the season. He's got 5 pass breakups. For a mighty might, he can tackle. Just saw a clip last night, absolutely laying the hammer from his safety spot. So, again, this comes back to the slotting, the roster management, the back end of your recruiting classes really be having to be where you hit. I think Ohio State, kudos to them for not overthinking it, and shame on all these other schools that were maybe hoping to lure, Jeremiah Smith potentially into the transfer portal. Like no one went on Angelo Smith, and it's again, I think this kid can play some football. In terms of guys that like Ohio State is in on, David Gabriel Georges, the running back out of Tennessee. I think he's the best Canadian running back since Chuba Hubbard. It might actually be better than him. Dan, you talk about, Ohio State being very calculated when they're going to push all the chips in. I'm under the impression they're going to do that for DGG. That's what we're calling him. I think he is a potential focal point of an offense. I mean, this kid is physical. He's fast. He's got the burst. He's got the vision. He's been excellent there at the Baylor school in their marquee games. I mean, running for over 200 yards on multiple occasions. If you're going to be a running back and we're going to rank you as a 5-star prospect, you better be a dude. DGG is that dude. And then a few others that were just in the stands this past weekend. Mark Matthews, the offensive tackle there at St. Thomas Aquinas High School, elite kick step. Reminds me a lot of Tristan Wirfs. He's going to be the highest ranked offensive lineman to ever come out of STA, right? Which is a storied program there in South Florida.
Bosa's, Michael Irvin, etc.
Yep. And to me, Mario Cristobal and Miami are right there. I've always gotten the vibe from Mark Matthews that I just don't think he's going to stay in Florida. I could be completely wrong, but I think he's a guy that's going to venture outside of state lines, and Ohio State getting him there, that's a big deal. John Meredith, another Devin Sanchez, might even have a higher ceiling than Devin Sanchez, and I say that lightly. Love him, 5-star cornerback out of Texas. I know Ohio State's going to be fighting a lot of big ones there, but getting him on campus is certainly a big deal as well.
We are as you notice here, Miss D. Sanchez is a fan of the show. Let's end it on a purely positive thing. Your thoughts on Devin Sanchez when you saw him in high school, your expectations for him, and then you obviously probably aren't surprised that he's gotten on the field early. He was on the field as early at that. I mean, that is really hard to do at Ohio State, man. It is really hard to get on the field in pressure situations as a true freshman. So let's just ask on the greatness of Devin right here and make his mom happy.
Well, he was on my annual freaks list, and sometimes it's hard to contextualize why these guys are, quote unquote, like freaks, and it's a play on Bruce Feldman's freaks list, but Mike Roach, who covers Texas for 247 Sports, he told me this story. Devin Sanchez was at some type of DB retreat, right, with all these like NFL DBs, and I guess some of the NFL pros, they went over to Devin Sanchez and asked him like, hey, what training camp are you going to in a few weeks? And he's like, oh, I'm going to my senior year of high school. So, Yeah, he's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got the feel. Like it's all there. I mentioned it on the front end, kind of like a pro's pro. I think he's the new age corner. This is what's in right now, right? Like these big long guys that can run and shadow top targets. You see it on Sundays. These are the guys that are doing it on Saturdays. I'll say this as well. Like our cornerback rankings were pretty dang dialed from this last cycle. Like I think I went through it. Of the top 17 guys we had, like a lot of them had played, and a lot of them have played over 100 snaps. It used to be a time when like it was hard for cornerbacks to get on the field, but these athletic pterodactyls keep emerging, and coaches them are throwing them out there. And I think what's unique about Devin is he was always polished. The technique was there. So not surprised that he's on the field. And I'll add this, like the other thing, what is keeping Ohio State and this roster construction and the high school, the offensive line, the transfer portals. The other thing is that they play the freshmen, right? Like, there are some programs that aren't getting those young guys involved. Bo Jackson, Devin Sanchez, both over 150 offensive or defensive snaps. Obviously, we saw what Jeremiah Smith did the year before. I think families, trainers, agents all take stock of that, right? Hey, you're telling us that we're a dude, okay? If we earn our playing time, are we going to play? Ohio State is one of the programs where that's a clear yes.
You cannot get this stat, and I can't get it either, but here's the stat. If I could get any, I would like right now. Playing time in production relative to payment. If you could, no, we just said no one knows who's getting paid what, but the idea of what programs are actually getting the most out of their salary cap, like you can do that in the NFL because you can just plug it in. So that'd be very, very interesting. All right, Andrew, that was maybe an all-time record. I probably cost you an interview with some major media outlet that you had to overlook, but I apologize. Ladies and gentlemen, Andrew is the best at what he does. Completely reliable, honest, and unbiased, despite the fact that he's in the Sunshine State. Where would you be if you were recruiting, if you were covering scouting and wanted to cut down on your travel expenses? I cannot thank you enough for the time you've dedicated. We will have you back on in a couple months to kind of assess everything, man. But have a great rest of the season. And seriously, thank you for everything you did for us today.
No, Dan, appreciate you having me on. Always fun. And buckle up, right? I think these next 4 weeks are going to be fun. I know Ohio State's 9 now. Bust out the recruiting class calculator. Start pinging in some of these guys. Jay Timmons, CJ Bronaugh. And maybe Ohio State does get into the top 5. Thanks,
Kevin Brown. All right. Appreciate you guys stopping by. Have a good one, Nutters of Buck.